to our Making Meaning time. Yesterday we read part of this book, Chameleons Are Cool, and we used our wondering skills to learn more about the book and grow our reading brains. So I want you to take a second before we start reading again and think, what did you learn about chameleons yesterday? Okay, great. So I am going to start where we finished yesterday. And I'll read the last page just to help refresh your memories. It said, their mouths are pretty odd. Odd means strange. Pretty odd, too. They turn down at the corners, which is why chameleons always look grumpy. Actually, they don't just look grumpy. They are grumpy. So if two chameleons bump into each other, things can get pretty lively. There's lots of puffing and hissing, and sometimes there's a real fight. I'm just gonna scooch my chair over a little bit. There we go. And that's when chameleons do what they're most famous for. They change colors. This here says, a chameleon will fight only with the same kind of chameleon as itself. That's interesting. Lots of people think chameleons change color to match their surroundings. They don't. They change color when they're angry, or when they're too cold or too hot, or when they're sick. And there are some sorts of chameleons that hardly change colors at all. As a rule, though, chameleons don't bump into one another all that often. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to call them lazy, but they certainly don't move any more than they have to. And when they do, it's almost always incredibly slow. Sometimes they stop completely in mid-step, as if they've forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. But if you look closely, you'll see that they're actually carefully peering about. Peering means looking around. And this says, a chameleon's feet are shaped like pinchers for holding onto branches tightly. What have you learned about chameleons so far in the part I just read? You can think about it in your brain, you can say it out loud, or you can turn to somebody in your home and talk to them. Okay, great. Let's keep reading. Now, peering about is something chameleons are rather good at. That's because their eyes can move separately from each other, unlike our eyes, which always move together. So while one eye is looking back over the chameleon's shoulder, the other one is scanning the branches ahead. As soon as it spots something tasty, the chameleon fixes both eyes on its prey and begins to creep forward, even more slowly than usual. Then it just opens its mouth, just a crack, and thwap! Out shoots this amazingly long tongue with a sticky tip at the end, like a piece of well-chewed chewing gum. I wanted to just go back to the page before and read the small print. It says, most of a chameleon's eye is covered in skin like the rest of its body. There's a tiny peephole in the middle that the chameleon sees through. I'll hold that up close so you can really look at their eyes. And this says, chameleons feed on all sorts of creepy crawlies. The big ones also eat small birds, mice, and even other chameleons. Look at that tongue. The tongue flies back and there's a lot of chomping and chewing. And perhaps a few bits of insect leg fluttering to the ground. After that, the chameleon just sits there for an hour or two, doing nothing very much at all, looking quite exhausted and still grumpy after all that hard work. Up here says, most lizards gulp their food down without chewing it, but chameleons grind everything up thoroughly. So I want you to think for a second, how do chameleons catch their prey? Okay, great. Let's keep reading. And there you have it. How could you possibly resist a pocket-sized, bad-temper, color-changing, swivel-eyed, snail-paced, long-tongued sharpshooter? If chameleons aren't cool, then I don't know what is. So I want you to think about, what are some of the reasons the author gives for why he thinks chameleons are cool? Okay, great. So let's talk about this book for a second. What was the most surprising or interesting thing that you learned about chameleons? Think about that. For me, the most interesting thing was learning why they change colors. I knew that they did change colors, but I always thought it was to match their environment, or what's that word? Camouflage. I thought it was they did it to camouflage themselves. I didn't realize it was because of the mood that they were in. That was very interesting to me. Okay. I want to go ahead and take a peek at the chart we made yesterday. I'm going to scoot back this way, of things that we wondered about chameleons. And I wrote down some of the things I wondered, and I wrote, I wonder why chameleons change colors. Did we find out the answer? We sure did. They change colors if they're angry or if they're uncomfortable, like they're too hot or too cold. I wrote, I wonder how big they are. What did we find out about that? Great. And then I wrote, I wonder what they eat. What did we learn about that? You got it. Great job, first grade. So now you have a job to do, and you're going to need to get a piece of paper and a pencil or pen or crayon, something that you can write with, okay? And I'm going to put up this piece of paper. It's a teacher-sized piece of paper, and it says, I don't know if you can see that very well. I'll hold it up. It says, what I learned and wondered about chameleons. Okay, and your job is to take your piece of paper, and I want you to write this title at the top of your paper. And then I'd like you to write and or draw about what you learned and wondered about chameleons. And this is a lot of words. So you can hit pause right now on the video, and you can leave this picture up so that you can copy it down onto your paper. And then you're going to write or draw your answer to that, okay? And when you finish, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. I'm going to ask you to go into Raz Kids or grab some books and do at least 15 minutes of independent reading, okay? We'll see you soon, first grade.